Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. Charlotte was the kind of anime where it's almost hard to look back once you've reached the end of it. A lot happens over the course of these 13 episodes, and because of that, I feel like it's almost inevitable that the spoiler-free section of this review is going to feel a little lackluster. That's what's really been tripping me up, trying to write this intro. A lot of the general descriptions I could use may be true for one half of the series, but not the other. There's a pretty drastic tone shift around that midway point. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Let's just start at the beginning. Charlotte introduces us to Yu Otosaka, a boy who realized in middle school that he had a special power. He can leave his own body and possess someone else. Only for about 5 seconds at a time, but that can be enough time to turn the tide of a fight, or steal test answers from the smartest kids in class. That's mostly what Yu uses it for, and he successfully cheats his way into one of the most elite high schools in the country. I'll have a lot to say about Yu as a character later, but for now, he's exactly where he wants to be, and is successfully starting a relationship with the girl of his choice at his new school, which started when he saved her life from an accident he engineered using his ability. So yeah, things are going great for Yu, right up until he's pulled out of class one day and told there are accusations that he cheated on his entrance exam. He's asked to retake the test in isolation, which, of course, he's unlikely to pass. But someone else bursts into the room before he has to see that through. A girl named Nao Tamori, who's secretly been following him around and documenting his abuse of his ability with the camcorder she always carries. Something she's been able to do so successfully because Nao has her own special power. She can turn invisible, albeit only to one person at a time. Nao explains to Yu that there are hundreds of teenagers like them. She likens their abilities to a disease, something that presents in later childhood but fades in adulthood. That's one of her bigger warnings. Not to set in motion a life where he relies on his ability to get by, because he won't have it forever. But she's got no shortage of darker warnings, too. Tales of scientists who imprison and experiment on kids like them. That's the fate that could have been awaiting him if he'd been caught by someone else. By comparison, her own demands seem pretty reasonable. She wants him to transfer to Hoshinomi Academy, a privately owned safe haven for kids with abilities, or kids expected to awaken them. Nao is the president of the student council there, though that's kind of a cover. They don't actually do much around the school. The student council is responsible for monitoring the area and either recruiting kids like them, or at least making sure they're more careful about how they use their powers so they don't get caught. Yu's resistant to this at first. Nao takes him in and gets that transfer processed mostly by force. But the crazy life of a student council member, and seeing firsthand how passionate they are about protecting others like them, no matter how questionable their methods may be sometimes, has Yu slowly warming up to the idea and making his first real friends. These early characters remain the heart of the series throughout, so let's talk about them a bit. Nao is accompanied on that first day by Jojiro Takajo, her right-hand man basically. He has the ability to teleport, but can't quite control where he stops. So when he's chasing Yu through the town in that first episode, it looks like a bunch of explosions are going off around him. Takajo is comic relief a lot of the time, but not in a way that felt like it really diminished his character. He had a way of just raising the energy of the scene. He was a lot of fun to have around, and his loyalty to Nao was pretty absolute. There are a couple scenes where it felt like they might start to explore something deeper to that, but by episode 3, almost all of his screen time is spent fawning over someone else. One of the first people they encounter is a girl named Yusa Kurobane, a popular idol in their world. But her celebrity status wasn't the only complication. Yusa's awareness of her own ability is a little foggy. She's a spirit medium in the most traditional sense. It's not that she can see ghosts, it's that they can take over her body and speak and act through her. But Yusa thinks she may just have narcolepsy or multiple personalities. I say ghosts plural, but it's really just one ghost. Her older sister, Misa, who died a few months ago. The sisters are polar opposites. Where Yusa is optimistic and sweet, Misa was the troublemaker of the family. Tough to the point of violence, outspoken, and running with a crowd of delinquents. And she has her own ability. Misa can summon fire, and notably, unlike the others, there isn't an obvious limitation to her power. She can also extinguish any fire she sets at will. I liked both sisters just fine. I will say, though Yusa definitely had her place in this group, the one thing that bothered me was how little focus she gets. I really wanted to see more of her bonding with the others on a deeper level. Every really meaningful moment involving the two of them happened when Misa was in control. I really liked Now, though her personality isn't one I've been able to sum up simply, and I think that's a good thing. She's not a one-note kind of character. She can be very intense. She's very serious about this mission she's appointed them all. But she could go from being tough and serious to upbeat and energetic in a heartbeat, and both sides of that felt genuine. That really shines during her interactions with the Kurobane sisters. She was really good at meeting both Yusa and Misa at whatever level they were on, matching their energies to make whatever point she needed to. And I don't mean to make her sound manipulative in a bad way, but she was willing to bend the rules in her quest to save people. This group could feel like the definition of chaotic good sometimes, and that made the early episodes a lot of fun. And finally, we've reached Yu himself. When you're first introduced to him, he's already lost his way a bit. The way his abilities allowed him to cheat his way to the top has made him arrogant and a little selfish. He's a little too caught up in the power, but I don't believe he was ever inherently a bad person. His fall from grace happens really early, so we don't get a proper look into what his long-term goals would have been. But looking at his home life, I've got a pretty good idea. There's something that can't be overlooked in this discussion, and it's that Yu Otosaka reminded me intensely of Lelouch from Code Geass, to a point where it could not possibly be coincidence, and there are other scenes throughout that felt like references that convinced me that the creators must be doing it on purpose. I want to be clear that I'm not saying this to suggest it felt like a knockoff. Charlotte very much has its own story, and if anything, it felt like a love letter to Code Geass, but that connection gave me a bit of a framework to guide how I viewed Yu. When I see people talk about Lelouch, I notice that some seem to get really caught up in his more theatrical moments and maniacal laughter. Sometimes people overlook the point of it all, that he wasn't fighting for world domination for the sake of world domination. It was always about making a safer, kinder world for innocent people like his sister who were too kind to fight for it themselves. And yes, he could be selfish about it. At the end of the day, if he'd had to sacrifice everyone else to ensure her safety, he would have done it. But it's still an admirable motivation. I actually kind of hate it when people liken him to Light from Death Note, because their motivations, what makes up the fundamentals of their characters to me, could not be more different, but I promised myself I'd spare you that rant. Yu also has an impossibly sweet little sister, Ayumi. To be honest, sometimes she veered into the annoying side of cute, but never to the point where I found her unlikable. They haven't had it easy growing up. We're not given a ton of exposition as to how they ended up living alone, but their dad left and their mom seems to have just given up. She signed custody over to an uncle when they were pretty young, but he just pays for the apartment they live in. There's no actual parenting involved. It's been just the two of them for a long time, and the Yu we see at school, cold, calculating, and manipulative, softens immediately once he gets home. The way he takes care of the ever-cheerful Ayumi and humors her questionable attempts at cooking. It's immediately apparent that she's the bright spot in his life, the thing that keeps him going when things get really tough. The first episode mostly focuses on Yu pursuing that girl he was interested in, and I suspect that was just to make a point, something to look back on later to show how much he's grown. but I really would have liked to see more of his home life in that first episode, because I think his desire to cheat his way to the top wasn't just about personal greed. He never vocalizes this, but I could really easily see those greater motivations being about making a better life for Ayumi. As soon as she was introduced, it was like a puzzle piece just fell into place. Yu's worst days don't last long, but she made him a lot easier to like. By episode 2, we've gotten a hint of the darkness awaiting this series. Nao's warnings of evil scientists aren't just paranoid hypotheticals. When she was in middle school, she and her brother were transferred, sold off really, to a very different kind of school. Nao's ability hadn't presented yet, so the tests they did on her were pretty normal physical exam stuff. But her older brother, who'd been caught manipulating sound waves at one of his band's concerts, was literally tortured into insanity. Nao escaped, the brothers living in some kind of care facility under constant sedation, and the whole mission and her passion for it becomes a lot more real, for both Yu and the audience, once he goes to visit him with her. He stops resisting the idea, at least. If one sibling presents with an ability, there's a good chance the others will too, so Ayumi was transferred into the Hoshinomi Middle School, and Yu is a little more motivated, understanding that it's not just his life at stake. But the first half of the series is still pretty relaxed. There were a lot of fun, goofy moments, a lot of focus on these 5 coming together as a group of friends, and we're about to get into the spoiler section. For anyone who's not sticking around for that, I cannot stress enough that Charlotte doesn't stay that way. Starting at the end of episode 6, the mood goes way downhill. Not in a bad way, just in a dark way. But the friendships that are formed early on remain the backbone of the series. Later in, when some of the storytelling is a bit rushed and oversimplified, it's the reason the tale as a whole continues to work. And though it may not be as consistently strong start to finish, they do dive into the darker parts of this world and bring everything to a real conclusion. So I would recommend checking out Charlotte if you haven't seen it. There was definitely more good than bad. And now, there are some later episodes I've been dying to talk about, that are necessary to talk about if we're looking to sum up this series as a whole. So, spoilers ahead. The storytelling doesn't start to get a little weak until episode 10, but there are some major events leading up to that point that we have to talk about first. Ayumi's really been loving her new school, but at the end of episode 6, she's cornered in the stairway by a jealous classmate threatening her with a box cutter. In her panic, she activates her own ability, Collapse. It's basically a localized earthquake that destroys that whole section of the school, and she's killed in the destruction. I was shocked that they actually pulled that trigger and killed her off. It's definitely the moment that marks the end of Phase 1 of the story. What follows is a really beautiful portrayal of grief, with Nao arriving to pull Yu out of it just as he's about to hit rock bottom. He ends up going to a concert with her as he's trying to settle back into ordinary life, but something happens at that concert, as the band premieres a new song that no one should have heard before. It starts with a weird sense of déjà vu, and ends with Yu comatose, possibly hallucinating. At first, it feels like you've been dropped into an alternate universe. One where Yu and Ayumi grew up in a facility like the one Nao escaped, where they're under constant surveillance and frequently tested and experimented on. But these memories bring Yu through the days of a jailbreak he and a few friends planned, with the ultimate goal being to free Shunsuke, Yu and Ayumi's older brother, who has the power to travel through time. When Yu's mind returns to the present day, Nao reveals that she actually knows Shun. He's the mysterious benefactor who bought Hoshinomi Academy and established it as a safe haven for kids with special powers. They track him down to get the whole story, and learn that he had another ability user wipe Yu and Ayumi's memories of him to try and keep them safe. But Yu's memories also revealed something else. That Yu hasn't fully understood his ability. It's not just a matter of taking over someone else's body for a few seconds. That possession also steals that person's ability if they have one, effectively making you the most powerful person in this world. But we'll talk about that in a bit. For now, he has smaller goals. The limitation to Shun's ability was that he needed his sight to use it, and he went blind after creating this most recent timeline. But Shun hasn't lost his power, just his ability to use it, so in a matter of 5 seconds, Yu gains the means to go back in time and save his sister. That whole explanation, as well as the journey to go back and rescue Ayumi, is all in episode 10, where I mentioned things started to get a bit rushed. I know I just dropped a ton of information on you at once, and we'll talk about it all, including the final phase of the story, where Yu travels the world to steal every ability in existence. But first, let's talk about this quest to save Ayumi. Namely, that if her death was a surprise, it was definitely a surprise that I don't actually have anything negative to say about her resurrection. For one, I swear that I am blind to all the shows I've put up on my polls. I reviewed Sakurada Reset for February, and I couldn't believe that a mere 2 months later, I'd run into another story where the main character enacts some form of time travel to bring back a girl who died. It really caught me off guard, but also, this could have gone so wrong. I normally hate it when a show backtracks on a death just for the sake of a happy ending. We've already seen some of that this year, too. You have to ask yourself what Ayumi's death brought to the series. One saving grace is that it wasn't really major to the final plot. Yu was already having weird dreams of a boy who would turn out to be Shunsuke. The concert would have happened anyway, and he'd already fallen in love with their music earlier in the series. It was one of his first really good bonding moments with Now. Ayumi's death definitely had an impact on her brother, but not in the sense that it totally changed his personality or motivations going forward, as is sometimes the purpose of a character death. I described his little grief arc as beautiful, and I'm not really talking about his descent into depression and then self-destruction. I'm glad they took the time for that, but what was really special to me was what came after. The effort he had to put into bouncing back, all the little moments where he had to force himself to do the things he used to enjoy, and remind himself that it was okay to still enjoy them. His knee-jerk reaction to call her, to tell her he wouldn't be home for dinner, only to remember that there was no one waiting at home anymore. Her death is still so present in every aspect of his life, even once he's getting back on track and starting to recover. Charlotte honestly may have one of the best portrayals of grief I've ever seen, and I was pleased to see that bringing her back didn't override that, like I feared it might. Yu maintains the growth he got as a person from that experience, and her death wasn't central to the final plot, so there's no good reason I can think of to argue that she should have stayed dead. If going back to save Ayumi had taken up the rest of the series, I would probably feel differently. As it is, I have no complaints. That sentiment really sums up the last third of the anime for me, that there are so many places it could have gone irretrievably downhill, so many pitfalls I was on the lookout for with each new reveal, and the writers managed to sidestep them all. There are definitely elements that are weaker than others. I can't say I felt particularly attached to any of the characters introduced from the older brother reveal onwards. There's more than one big dramatic scene they go in for in those last 4 episodes that just didn't connect well enough to make me emotional about it. You just don't have enough time with those characters to make those moments work. But those moments would always be followed by a slower one, where we'd check back in with the characters we've known from the beginning, and that would redeem the weaker scenes for me. I was torn sometimes, worrying that there wasn't time for those slower scenes when there was still so much to get through before the show's end. But I couldn't be too hard on them because we really needed those reminders of how far they'd come and what they were fighting for. One of those potential pitfalls was that they do go the route of revealing something that makes the main protagonist untouchably powerful. It's always a tightrope walk when your main character is too special. There are so many ways that can ruin everything, suck all the likability right out of him. I think it's so important that this show started where it did. I hate setups that are pure, cheap wish fulfillment, where the main character is incredibly powerful or skilled in some sense, but you didn't get to watch them work for it. Yu Otosaka walks that line, but even at its worst, it was tolerable. I was so skeptical about the final episode. I honestly didn't think we'd get a conclusion to this journey. I expected it to be left a little open-ended, that the final scene would be Yu setting off into the sunset or something, on his quest to bring peace by stealing all the world's magic powers. Which there is some logic behind. Those last few episodes were literally a marathon of exposition at times. I keep finding myself forgetting to explain things. There's this comet, named Charlotte, that passes by the Earth every 70 years or so. The people who got magic powers breathed in the spores it left behind. The scientists Shun's working with have created a vaccine, so no one will be affected by it next time. The goal now is to clean up the mess it left 12 years ago, stop all the gangs and terrorists who are taking advantage of these abilities to cause havoc. That whole journey is condensed into the final episode, and don't get me wrong, there was enough material there for a whole second season, but it also surprisingly worked. It's the most rushed plotline by far, but there's still enough time for a fairly heartfelt portrayal of Yu slowly losing his mind over the course of it, his brain overloaded by all the abilities he's stolen and the constant threat of danger. He's kept together, just barely, by a memento from now he's held on to since the beginning. It gets to a point where he can't remember who she is anymore, but he knows there's someone he promised to return to once this mission is over. A perfect example of the writers focusing in on exactly the right thing at a time when the story could have so easily lost touch with what made it special, after all the crazy turns it had taken. The biggest potential downfall for me was the conclusion. I was really wary of how they were going to end this tale. I said that it felt like a love letter to Code Geass, but the line between feeling like a tribute versus a knockoff really hinged on that ending. If they'd tried to give you a tragic, sacrificial death, it just would have fallen flat. There wasn't enough time to build up to that. And so, the final conflict is way oversimplified, and the happy ending is a little cheesy, but I still think it was the better choice. It's a good happy ending. I knew I'd have a lot to say, because the second half of the show is so wildly different from the first, but I did not expect this review to turn into this much of a monster. Over and over again during those final episodes, I found myself thinking, you know, it's not perfect, but I can't really bring myself to be disappointed. I really started to respect the writers near the end. This is an ambitious amount of story to fit into 13 episodes, and they seem to have really understood their limitations. I feel like they probably knew their finished product wasn't going to be amazing, but they took whatever steps they could to make it good. Compromises were made, but the focus remained on the right things. I have no reservations about recommending Charlotte if you haven't seen it. Thank you for watching.